Well, I'm here with Mayor Provenzano and City CEO Malcolm White, and we're here to talk, do a little question and answer about the budget. Thank you for coming and availing yourself to this opportunity. We got some questions from readers. First thing I wanted to kick off maybe just by asking, is this budget for this year going to be unique in any way? Is it, you're faced with any particular challenges? I guess that could be for you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, sure. So listen, thank you for giving us the opportunity to meet with you here today and speak to you and answer your readers' questions. We always appreciate being able to be accountable and transparent, and this is a good forum to do that in. So yeah, we're heading into budget. We are hoping certainly to elicit and get as much feedback as we can on our budget. Encourage people to look at the documents and the information the city will be putting out, and reach out to your city councilors, express your opinions and ideas, reach out to me and do the same. Frank, from my perspective, going into this budget, most budgets are challenging, and we have the overlay of COVID and some of the challenges that come with COVID. I want to recognize and thank the federal government for their significant support throughout COVID, and the provincial government also for its continued support. They made some of the budgetary challenges certainly easier to manage. But I don't really see any budget individually more challenging than another budget. We always go into it with, I think, the same goals. We want to make sure we are respectful of the taxpayer dollar. We want to make sure we minimize to the greatest degree possible any potential levy increase, and that we want to make sure that we are still delivering important and valuable and quality services that our residents expect us to. So on a year-to-year basis, I approach it with that lens, and every budget every year presents its own respective challenges. We have, generally speaking, an assessment challenge in our community. Some of our costs, Frank, specifically our emergency services costs, like police and fire, are often tied to rates of remuneration across the province. So if you're in a city like Mississauga, it's a lot easier to absorb the increases of those costs because you have an increased assessment base. When you're in a smaller city center, or when you're a regional city center like Sault Ste. Marie in Northern Ontario, and you don't have the same assessment growth, it's a little more difficult to do that. So those are challenges that aren't unique to this year. They're the challenges that we have on a year-over-year basis. I'm happy to defer to the CAO if you had anything further you wanted to add.
On that respect, I think, Frank, for the budget this year, we are still dealing with the COVID pandemic. Most recently, we're complying with the Ontario vaccination mandate as far as screening for our recreational facilities and ensuring. So things like that do come with extra costs. As the mayor noted, the federal government and the provincial government have been very helpful throughout the pandemic at giving additional funding to municipalities to cover these costs. We're hopeful that that continues so we can handle the latest number of costs that we get. Hopefully in 2023, we're not talking about the pandemic too much and extra costs, and we're able to get back to business as usual.
Okay, the COVID, can you give us an idea as to what impact it had on the budget? What was the biggest thing you think COVID did to your budgeting for the city?
What we do is, so if we look at last year's budget, we did anticipate that we might be able to get back to normal operations by halfway through the year. And we budgeted along those lines. In the end, it didn't work out that way. We are still dealing with pandemic costs. It did affect us in a way in that we looked at the funding we received. We were able to address most of our extra costs or revenue losses through it, but we still did need to allocate part of our tax stabilization reserve to make the budget complete, and hopefully we'll see by year end if we had to dip into that at all this year. Looking at 2023, we really are just preparing a budget as we normally would, and we'll know better once we get to budget deliberations at what pandemic considerations we may need to add in.
Okay. And do you have a benchmark, a goal? I mean, is your goal a 0% tax increase, or do you go into a budget with that in mind?
Certainly, we're aware that other municipalities do that. That hasn't been the approach here during this council's term, or even the council term before it. The way our budgeting works is we do let council know what the additional measure of costs will be in order to deliver the same level of services. So we always have inflationary increases, contractual increases in our input costs for materials and supplies. So we do let council know this is what our estimate is as far as a level of increase that we will need in order to keep business running the same as it has been. And for that serves as a starting point for our discussions.
Frank, I can add to that too, as far as the goal. I don't think many councillors, myself included, don't go into budget saying we have to zero this out. I think we all go into budget very mindful of the cost to the taxpayer, very mindful of and thinking about different things that we can do to, reduce the levy impact. But I don't know that it's a reasonable position just to say before budget starts that we're going to zero it out, because it would be a very difficult thing to do without actually affecting the investments that we need to make in our infrastructure across the city. There are many line items in our budget that aren't adjusted upwards year to year. And there are many places in our budget where we are underinvesting. We've had independent third-party reports that indicate that, and that encourage that we have to make additional investments in critical things like information technology and our digital capacities, which we have not invested in historically. So it would be a very difficult position to go in with that as a goal. I think, generally speaking, the goal is to work as hard as we can and make sure that any increase is frankly relative to or in close proximity to what would be a reasonable increase considering independent measures.
Yeah. We've got questions from our readers, and one topic that was often brought up, maybe because it's fairly recent in the news, is the downtown plaza. And they look at the money that council is promising for that and then put it up against some other, what they consider other priorities. Can you maybe address that to a certain degree?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Yeah, happy to. So look, that part of what council has to do is, in its main role really, is in giving staff direction, is balancing priorities and making investments kind of in accord with a prioritization that council has to determine and set. It's been a strong priority for a number of years to improve our downtown. So that's the broad global priority, and we didn't just approach that in a kind of a hand-handed sort of way or just randomly. There was a lot of work, a lot of effort, a lot of consideration, a lot of work with stakeholders in the community to figure out what we could do to really impact our downtown. I think people now largely agree that the Bay Street project was a really nice project. That brings the water, visually and as far as a pedestrian is concerned, it feels physically closer to Queen Street. We reduced all those lanes on Bay Street. Bay Street is much more attractive. Queen Street is on the books to be redesigned and improved. So that's coming. We have a potential project for Spring Street, which is a connector from the water to Queen Street. We've improved our marina. And, we decided as a result of consultations and engagements and a consideration by, an expert of our downtown core that we needed to have, a real central attracting feature. So I think the decision to move the Mill Market into the middle of the downtown and to invest in really what was an area that we largely already owned to create really a vibrant public space that people from across our community could feel comfortable and use was a logical next step and consistent with all the work we've done. So, it to me, when you look at the investments in the downtown, it would be a shame for the city to say we're not going to invest in the downtown ourselves. You have a number of private sector property owners who have made significant and beautiful investments in their own buildings. in their assets downtown. And then you have the private sector that really reached out and is supporting this project and making investments in the project itself. So the one thing I'd like to point out to people, and I think this is really important, is we didn't get the provincial funding we were looking for, but we were able to top up the project with federal funding. So a lot of the project, a significant chunk of the project, is being funded by monies that we receive from the federal government that can be used for this type of project. They can be used for infrastructure projects. It's not necessary that we could generally use those monies for other projects. And we certainly couldn't use those monies for projects that are ongoing or operating costs year over year. Operating costs year over year are borne in the levy and they're not one-time expenses. So, you know, we think we really approached this in a very judicious way and that we were responsible in the budgeting. And the municipal contribution is a reasonable contribution to this project. And, you know, I'll point to another project, Frank. You know, everybody believed that it was the right thing to do to build a twin pad and to increase the activity up on the community center. And that project came in significantly over budget. And I would suggest to you that it was a much more expensive project that arguably might not have as many people in the community, you know, engaged in it on a frequent basis, although it will be very heavily used. Council saw fit to approve that project, move forward with that project, notwithstanding the significant expense of the project and the extra expense of the project that we did not anticipate having. So you know, we have to make these decisions. We have to balance these priorities. I think that one of the ways that we can improve our downtown is introducing really healthy activity into it, vibrant activity into it. And I think that this is one of the ways council can do that.
Do you think, like right now, just from my own observations, is the pavilion, Bonder Pavilion, being utilized enough right now? And are the two going to kind of compete for, you know, events like Canada Day or whatnot? I mean, it seems like you have a nice spot there for things, and now you're going to have another one. I mean, do we need two really?
They're not the same type of infrastructure, so they don't have the same intention. We don't see them as competing assets. We certainly won't program them as the municipality with competing assets. And if the Bonner Pavilion is underused, and I think you're probably right in your observation on that, like, you know, we have to assess what the reason for that is. That's not a reason to not develop other infrastructure that would be attractive to the community and create community development. But if it is underused, it seems to me it's not something we should point to as a piece of infrastructure that can displace a new piece of infrastructure that we don't believe will be underused.
Okay. Speaking of the downtown, I mean, what I often hear from people is one of the problems with the downtown, I think, is it deals with some of the opioid crisis and crime. And I'm wondering what your strategy is and how you're going to use the budget to address that particular situation and those issues that you know, many people who walk around downtown and who use downtown see every day.
So yeah, that's a big, you know, that's a big question, and you know, it's something that we've worked hard on and focused on for a number of years, and it's certainly something that we work closely with the Algoma Leadership Table to address. It's certainly something we work closely with the Social Service Administration Board to work on. But the reality, a large part of the reality here is we need support from the other levels of government to make sure that the healthcare infrastructure is in place in our community to give people access to the care they need. Substance misuse and substance abuse is a health issue, and we need to make sure that people can access the care that they need to access. And if people can access that, we're going to continue to see the problems that we've seen over the last number of years. So, you know, it's a much larger problem than something that a municipal budget can really address effectively. So we have very little funds in our budget. You know, Algoma Public Health is an independent budget, but it levies through us. So it's part of our levy. So it's part of the municipal levy. So outside of Algoma Public Health and those health funds that it levies, the municipality doesn't levy money for healthcare. The municipality doesn't have authority to levy money for healthcare. The municipality doesn't have authority to build the healthcare that needs to be built, or the resources to build the healthcare that needs to be built. to provide people the care that they need. Now, on the criminal part of the question you raised on policing, that certainly does fall under the municipality. The municipality is responsible for making sure that the community is adequately policed. And I can tell you in that respect that we have never spent more on policing than we are right now. I'm just going to use rough numbers, but our police service budget 10 years ago was around 23 million, and now we're hitting 33 million. So that's a $10 million increase, over a decade. And again, I'm using rough numbers, but I'm pretty confident they're relatively accurate. I've looked at what we spend on policing and how many officers we have relative to our comparator communities: North Bay, Thunder Bay, Sudbury, Timmins, Sarnia, Peterborough, Belleville. And, we are not underspending on policing, and we do not have a small complement relative to our population. So the reality is that there are significant healthcare challenges out there that aren't being met. People that have substance abuse issues are not criminals. And even though they're using substances and that is illegal, they should not be criminalized. What needs to be criminalized is the production of the narcotic and the distribution of the narcotic. And we're focused on that. And I think you can see that Sault Ste. Marie Police Services makes a significant effort to focus on that and to arrest people that are distributing the drugs. But the people that are using the drugs, they need care, and we need to do a better job making sure that the other levels of government come to the table and give them the care, give us the infrastructure we need in our community to give them the care they need.
So increasing the police budget or beefing up the police isn't to help alleviate the problem.
Well, there's another increase in the police budget this year. So there's been an increase in the police. Frank, there's been an increase in the police budget every year since I've been the mayor. We have increased the police service budget, year over year, and it's going up again this year. It'll be at council during budget. Everybody will see what it is at now, and frankly, it will continue to increase because of the labor costs that relate to policing. So I actually expect that by the end of the next council term, it might well be that policing is the most expensive thing we do in the community and is a bigger budget than public works. So it's not for lack of resources being invested in policing, and the police service budget is in fact going up again.
I know the big news story in the United States has been this movement to defund the police. It's kind of poorly worded, but I think the idea is to take some of that money and put it into social services. Is that something that you consider at budget time?
That's been suggested here. It's not been something that I've supported, and the reason why I haven't supported that is because you have to make the investments in the social services and the healthcare infrastructure first, because the pressure and the calls and the demand for service is still on the police services. I think over 80% of police service calls are for social disturbance now. So you can't defund the police or reduce their budget or reduce their capacity to respond to those calls before you have addressed the problem. But there's certainly, a reasonable argument that if the problem is addressed, our demand for policing will go down. And if that happens, then you deal with it at that time and you look at your budgets at that time. But that has not happened. And I do not think you can take money from policing and invest it in healthcare and social services at the expense of policing, and then expect the police services not to be significantly taxed and stressed and overworked while those resources are being invested, because it's not going to be an immediate difference. There needs to be a significant investment in the healthcare system, more money than you could actually take from policing. There isn't enough money in policing to make the investment in the healthcare system the provincial government needs to make in the healthcare system to give people the quality of care and access to care that they need. That needs to be made. If that's made and that decreases demand for service, then you deal with that when that happens. But right now, the demand for service is there. Our police officers are working hard. They have very difficult jobs and they are busy. And, they are out when they're on shift, they're out and they're working. And I don't know how you decrease their budget at the expense of investments that frankly should be made independent of the policing budget.
Just one more thing on this and these social issues. Some cities in the north have invested in safe consumption sites, and I know that it's being studied here in the Sioux. Where are we at now with that in Sault Ste. Marie, and do you see that as something that we're going to establish in the future? And can the city support it financially?
So I support safe consumption. Certainly, I think that there are parties in our community. There are parties in our community developing safe consumption site plans. There's a process you have to go through to get properly recognized with the Ministry of Health and with Health Canada. I apologize, and then people are working through that. It's something that could be supported through the public health budget. Something that could be supported through Algoma Public Health. I think it would be challenging to levy through the municipal budget for it. But we'll look at what other municipalities have done to support that, and we can consider if that makes sense in our community. But I certainly support safe consumption. I think it would be a healthy and constructive step forward. It might help us deal with some of our challenges, and I've made it clear to the people in the community that are going through the proper channels to do it that I would support their efforts.
Okay. Getting maybe to some road projects and some of the capital works. One reader asked, will there finally be money allocated to resolve traffic on Great Northern Road? Example, Sackville Road extension to third line. Maybe you can just talk in general terms. You can maybe address his specific thing specifically, but maybe you can talk in general terms as to some of your bigger road projects coming up, and if you can maybe touch upon that.
Yeah, well, I'll let the CEO speak about the specifics of the roads budget, but I can speak just generally about this. This goes back to the question of balancing, wants and needs, and really doing what we can on a limited budget. So we should also point people to the fact that we're focused on developing and creating complete streets, and we're also focused on promoting active transportation. So there is more than one way to reduce traffic, and we want to engage in some of these other methods of traffic reduction, and I think the city's come a long way in implementing bicycle lanes and really hopefully encouraging people to engage in active transportation. And we're seeing quite a bit of active transportation around the city, and I think people are interested in seeing more of it. I think it's one of the things that people look for when they're looking at cities they want to relocate to. I think it's an indicator of a healthy city. With specific respect to Sackville, that's a project that was on the books. It's been deferred. It is still in the books. I think the CEO will tell you it's a staff recommendation that project happens, and it will be a decision of council as and when it does happen. But it's still something that is alive and there and can move forward. Although I think the EA on it might have expired now, so there'd be a little bit more work that has to be done before it can move forward. But these are things that council actively discusses and is engaged with. And we'll continue to focus on developing them. We recognize that there is an intersection in our city that is challenging at specific times of the day, specific days of the week. Otherwise, it's a pretty easy intersection to get through. Certainly on the weekends, it really isn't. I've never had significant challenges at that intersection. We're fortunate in that respect because there are a number of cities that have multiple intersections that are problematic. And that don't pass essentially kind of the traffic count standards, and we have one. So it's an issue that we will have to address at some point. But there are different ways we could address that. We're working on some now, and when and if the Sackville extension gets built, I think will be a decision for a future council.
As the mayor has noted, it's always a balancing act for council. We always have a number of roads projects that we bring forward. We generally categorize them into 5-year capital programs for our transportation needs. Sackville has been on and will continue to be on as a need coming forth. However, we never usually get to be able to build or reconstruct all the roads that we would like to in any given year. And when we come to the end of any 5-year capital transportation plan, there's always a number of projects that had to be deferred either through a lack of financing or the council determined a different priority sequence. So Sackville remains in that mix, and as we move forward, that and a whole lot of other roads will be on the list to be done.
So it's always, you're always playing a catch-up game. I mean, after 5 years, you got to replace the road that you replaced so many years ago. Is there a better way to do? Some cities have invested in new equipment that helps fix potholes. For example, I think it's called the Python machine. I'm not sure. Is the city looking at anything like that? Do you think that's worth considering?
Yeah, we continuously look at all methods like that. When a new technology comes out, quite frankly, Sault Ste. Marie is not flush enough with resources that we can just automatically jump out and try the technology as soon as it comes out. What we do is we keep our eye on it, monitor it, and start to assess and talk with other people who are using it to see if it is something that would work here. You do see new technology in evidence with our public works. I think everyone has seen our new machines that we use for sweeping and cleaning the sidewalks and the hub trail. Those have been a real nice addition for us, and really able to augment our service on those areas. Another example is what we've done with waste collection in moving to a more automated system. We were able to reduce, we only had 4 FTEs equivalent doing our waste collection for the part that the city does. We do half the city with our own resources. With the addition of that technology, we reduced it to 3 FTEs. So we are constantly looking at either new technology or new ways of managing things. You'll see a large report come to council on the October 25th meeting on a fleet management review, which will be a significant amount of third-party expertise that has assessed how we use our fleet, what we use in it, and what are some best ways forward in improving our fleet utilization.
Okay, another reader asked, and you may not agree with the premise of the question, but I'll just read it anyways. One reader asked, it's common knowledge and visibly obvious that the City Board of Works is overstaffed. As opposed to laying anyone off, why not have a hiring freeze or try to efficiently run the jobs? How would you respond to that reader?
I feel strongly that this is the question that the CEO, I should give him an opportunity to answer, but I'm going to jump in before he answers it here. I do disagree with the premise of the question. I don't think it is common knowledge. It might be a common opinion, but I would tell you that in my experience, it's a mistaken opinion. The CEO had just indicated that we have 3 full-time equivalents who pick up the garbage in this city. So that are on the municipal staff. The remainder of them are contracted out services. But we have 3 people at Public Works who help with garbage collection in this city. And I think they do roughly half of the city. We do not have significant crews up there that are idle, as the question implies. I want to recognize the Public Works team. I want to recognize their good work and what they do across our city. And I'm just going to point to one thing that evidences their value. I think I have received more compliments this year than I have any other year about the quality of the beautification around the downtown and the parks, particularly Bellevue Park, and the care that they're kept in. And that's city staff that's doing that. So they have a large city to cover. They cover it well. And I think they're working hard. So I don't accept the premise of the question that it's commonly known. It's factually the case that we're overstaffed there. I don't believe that is the case. I believe we've got a really great leadership team there, and I believe they're doing a good job with the staff that they have. And I think they'd be able to make the case in a number of public work areas we're understaffed. So with that noted and that expression of support, I'll let the CAO add whatever he'd like to.
Sure. I mean, one element of the question said, why not have a hiring freeze? And well, unintentionally we have for the last couple of years because we haven't had to or haven't been able to have a full staff complement. Ourselves, like other businesses in the city, are struggling to find enough qualified people to fill all the positions that we have available. And we have not been up at full complement at Public Works for a couple of years now. Certainly, as I mentioned in the previous question, we're always looking at new and better ways to do our work and to schedule it. However, all the jobs that we do have detailed work plans. We do have to ensure that we're doing jobs in a proper health and safety environment and manner, and that we are complying with Ministry of Labor regulations as far as how we do our work. Our work is always increasing because the city doesn't shrink, really. It is growing. We generally have new streets, new facilities that we then add to and take care of without necessarily having budget adjustments to take care of them. We do lay off a certain amount of our staff in the springtime. We continue to do that during the shoulder season between winter control and the start of getting things ready for spring and summer. But one thing I can say is we certainly understand that sometimes citizens may have a question about why we do something or how we're doing it, and they think that maybe we're not thinking of a better way of doing it. We're happy at any time to have those conversations with citizens and explain to them why we do that. Sometimes we may pick up very good input that we can look at changing something. Otherwise, we're able to convey to a citizen all the information that maybe they didn't realize that goes behind doing a certain task. So I just wanted to note that certainly we're always willing to engage with citizens, and we can certainly do it through email, but I also want to note our social media channels. We have Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and we in fact get a lot of inquiries over those channels, and where people inquire and we're able to give them an answer.
Okay, thank you. Another reader asked, she wanted to see the Veterans War Memorial Monument completed in Cleric Park and maybe even somewhere in the plaza. And she says this tribute to our veterans is long overdue. Certainly, it seems like a real worthy project. And maybe in general terms, I was wondering how you get so many of these great ideas, and they're almost impossible to say no to, because how can you really say no? This isn't worthwhile. So maybe philosophically, how do you approach somebody who comes to you with that idea and maybe there's no money in the budget to do it? I don't know. Like, how do you come to grips with that?
Yeah, so maybe on that project specifically, that's an independent group that is fundraising for that. They had asked City Council prior to my mayoralty, so the term before I was the mayor, so the 2010 to 2014 term, permission to locate that project in Cleric Park, and they received that permission, and they've been working on generating the revenues that they need to generate to put that up since. So it goes back to the question of, if we were asked for resources to support that, we'd have to balance that ask against similar asks and similar investments, and then against our own projects and responsibilities and priorities that we have as a municipality. Agree that it's a worthwhile project, met with the group a number of times. City staff has met with the group a number of times. We did try and brainstorm some ways that maybe we could help them kind of develop it, but that would be for our purposes probably in a different place, in order that we can kind of reduce our own maintenance kind of ongoing costs on it. So we'd offered different types of supports and had some discussions where we thought maybe it made sense to locate it somewhere else. And if they were agreeable to that, we could work on it together. But the group is really focused on the project as they conceived of it. They're focused on locating it as they've developed it in Cleric Park. And we will continue to support them as we can, as best as we can, balancing that support against other obligations that we do have to the community at large. So yeah, it's challenging. It's challenging to make decisions on one project over another and how you're going to support different projects. We do our best with them, but it's part of the job. And when you ask for that responsibility, you got to approach it in good faith and do your best to make good decisions. And hopefully, we'll see that project come to pass in the near term. I can tell you that we're making our own investments in the Memorial Tower, improving that asset, and I think that's long overdue. And I'm happy that we'll be doing that in the near term. And I think people will be really pleased when that's completed.
Okay. Speaking of growth, I was wondering if you could maybe touch on economic development in the city, and just the whole idea of growing the tax base for the city, and where that's heading. Where do you see the biggest opportunities for growth in the city, and how it can help it move along?
Well, so it's a two-part question. So assessment growth and economic development, and I'll approach them as best as I can. I think there's some exciting projects that are in the development stage or near groundbreaking stage that can, help our assessment growth. We saw at last council the potential of a condominium building downtown on Bay Street near the Plaza project. That's really exciting. There's another residential development in the downtown core that might get started soon. That's exciting. We're working on a project with the Ontario Aboriginal Housing Authority, which was a really exciting project. And in the end, it decided not to move forward with the Gateway site, but it's still, I think, interested in moving forward with the project. So we have to see if we can land a plane on them and help them find a piece of property that is suitable to their needs. So we keep on focusing on some of those larger scale residential developments. I think that will help our tax base. But as far as economic development goes, I'm really excited about where this is going to go. I think the city made a really important move over the last couple of years in really taking ownership over tourism and economic development. Every year over year, the city would essentially send out a couple $1 million and have other people look after it. And in the end, council decided that wasn't in the best interest of the community at large, and made the decision to take the staff and the resources back in house. I think that decision is going to pay dividends once we get the team really up and running properly. And now we have a really good new team assembled. They're working together. We have a business retention manager. We have a manager that's going out to seek new business and bring that to the community. We've got a really strong economic development plan. So I'm excited about the future of economic development and tourism in Sault Ste. Marie. I think that there's going to be great synergies within the municipality to really work hard on these really important files and really make some progress. Specifically, there's lots of opportunity in tourism that I think personally that we can and will be focusing on. There's lots of opportunity in the IT sector that we want to focus on. There's some opportunity in manufacturing we want to focus on. And I just want to pause there and just recognize the significant investments that our manufacturers that are here are making. We have the potential of a $750 million investment in Algoma Steel, which will modernize the steel mill and really make it a turn-of-the-century steel mill that will be forward-looking and be really on the cutting edge. I think that's great for the community. We have Tenaris moving a significant part of its operations to this community, making over $100 million investment in its own asset. So, if you look at just Tenaris and Algoma, you're north of $850 million of investment that's going to come into the community, which will have additional spillover effects, which I think are very positive. So I think there are a number of really bright years ahead of us here. And I think we've got the internal team in place now to really take advantage of that and to move the yardsticks forward. So, the council, this council and the council last term did a lot of good work, made a lot of challenging decisions, but they were the right decisions, and I'm confident they're going to pay dividends. And I think we've established Sault Ste. Marie as a great place to do business, and we have a bright future ahead of us here.
Okay. One of the things that it's kind of fallen off the radar screen is the ferrochrome plant. Do you have any update on that? Do you know where that is in terms of?
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to that. There really is no update on it. From the municipality's perspective, nothing has happened on that file for a year, but you do see lots of activity with the company. So the company is going through a process now where its shares are being, there have been offers on its shares from two competing parties. One of the parties that's offering on the shares is currently a large shareholder in the company. So I think it's fair to say that the project's fallen off the radar to a large degree. But I think there was a misunderstanding in the broader community, an understandable one, in how far along that project actually was. So Noront was always very clear that the development of that project was conditional upon the road being developed, and it was something that they were looking at subsequent to pulling out other minerals first, which minerals were going to go to Sudbury and be processed at Sudbury. So that was always a project that we understood was years away and was not going to proceed until it went through the proper federal and provincial regulatory processes and was approved to proceed. So it's only gotten farther away, frankly, since then, because the timelines that we saw a year ago haven't advanced at all from our perspective. So for the people that are against the project, I would tell you to not be significantly concerned at this point. There's lots of opportunity if the project does move forward to communicate about the project and engage in it. And the people who are for the project, I'd say to you, don't get too excited. There's a lot of road left here to cover. And there are a lot of things that can happen between now and when those processes start. But I can tell you very clearly from the municipality's perspective, we haven't engaged in any activity over the last year that moved the project forward. We haven't engaged in any conversations over the last year that moved the project forward. And there really is nothing new to report on the project at all. And we don't know what the status of the project will be when Noront settles its ownership process that it's currently engaged in. And I think one of the owners at least has been very clear that they're going to reconsider if they become owners, the projects that Noront's looking at and the order that they're looking at them, including the FPF project. And I'd also say, and this is worth considering, and it's something that I think we have to address at some point, probably will address in the near term. When we looked at the project actually, the FPF project was based on Noront operating an electric arc furnace. And we did the research to determine whether that was feasible, and obviously determined it was. But now Algoma, since then, has determined it's going to operate on an electric arc furnace. And it has lined up the resources to develop its project and will be developing an electric arc furnace project on that property. We haven't had any discussions with either Algoma or Noront or the province on whether it's even feasible that you can operate more than one electric arc furnace, and whether you have the power to operate more than one of them on the property, and whether we have the distribution, the generation distribution infrastructure to put that much power to the same piece of property. So there are a lot more open questions on that than there are closed questions. It is still a theoretical project that is, from our perspective, a long ways off if it does come to pass. And frankly, internally, I can say that the CAO, the Deputy CAO, Community Development and Affairs, Tom Bear, and I have had discussions about needing to bring some more clarity to the community in the near term about where this project, what this project looks like, and where it might go or where it might not go.
Okay. I know there's lots of things we can talk about, and hopefully you'd be willing to come back another day to chat, but this might be a good time to wrap it up, unless you have something you wanted to add. And any final thoughts?
Well, first one is I'd always be happy to come back and talk. I think it's important that I'm available to people and, answer questions and tell people what I think about things. So I appreciate the opportunity to do that. And I just want to end by welcoming people to engage in our budgeting process, visit the city's website, offer us your perspective and your information. We care about it. It'll be considered, it'll be reported to council, and we'll take those things into consideration when we have to make the decisions we'll have to make at the end of this year.
Thank you.
Certainly, as the mayor's pointed out, please engage with us through our website on specific budget questions. And just to let the public know, the preliminary budget will be given to council on November 29th. That will also include any outside agency presentations that we have. And then budget deliberations will occur December 6th and 7th as necessary. So that's the timeline we'll be looking at for council to consider the budget. So we're welcoming any input people feel that they'd like to give us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Appreciate the time.
Thanks.